The Haunted Evidence Room. In the heart of Ravenswood, there stood an old police station that had seen better days. The building, with its cracked walls and creaky floors, was a relic of a bygone era. Among the officers, there was one room that no one wanted to enter, the evidence room. It was said to be haunted, and the stories surrounding it were enough to send chills down anyone's spine. Officer Lisa Thompson, a dedicated and skeptical member of the Ravenswood Police Department, was tasked with organizing the evidence room. Despite the warnings from her colleagues, Lisa dismissed the ghost stories as mere superstition. She believed that the tales were simply the product of overactive imaginations and had no basis in reality. One rainy evening, Lisa decided to tackle the daunting task of organizing the evidence room. Armed with a flashlight and a notebook, she entered the room, determined to prove that there was nothing to fear. The room was filled with shelves of dusty boxes, each one containing items from various cases over the years. As she began sorting through the boxes, she felt a sudden chill in the air. The temperature seemed to drop, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She shrugged it off, attributing it to the drafty old building. She continued her work, but the feeling of unease persisted. Hours passed, and the rain outside intensified, creating a rhythmic tapping on the windows. Lisa's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She heard a faint whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. She strained to listen, her heart pounding in her chest. The whisper grew louder, evolving into a chorus of voices, each one overlapping the other. Lisa's flashlight flickered again, and she saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was barely visible, shrouded in darkness. "Help me," the figure whispered, its voice filled with pain. "I cannot rest." Lisa's mind raced as she tried to comprehend what she was seeing. She knew she had to find a way to help the restless spirit. She remembered the stories of unsolved cases and the items that had been stored in the evidence room. Determined to uncover the truth, she began to investigate the history of the room and the cases associated with it. As she sorted through the boxes, she found a collection of items from a particularly notorious case, the murder of a young woman named Emily Blackwood. The case had remained unsolved for decades, and the evidence had been stored in the room ever since. Among the items, Lisa found a locket with a photograph of Emily inside. As she examined the locket, she felt a sudden chill and heard a woman's voice whispering her name. The lights flickered, and she saw the shadowy figure standing in the corner once more. The figure pointed to a box labeled Cold Case Number 13. Inside, Lisa found evidence that had been overlooked, a diary belonging to Emily. The diary contained detailed entries about Emily's life, her fears, and the events leading up to her death. It also mentioned a man named Thomas, who had been a suspect in the case, but had never been charged. Lisa realized that the key to solving the case lay within the pages of the diary. Determined to bring justice to Emily, Lisa presented the evidence to her superiors. With the new information, the case was reopened, and Thomas was brought in for questioning. Under the weight of the evidence, he confessed to the crime, and justice was finally served. That night, Lisa returned to the evidence room, hoping to see the spirit one last time. As she entered the room, the air grew colder and the whispers returned. The shadowy figure appeared once more, but this time, its face was serene, and its eyes were filled with gratitude. "Thank you," the figure whispered. "I can finally rest." With that, the figure faded into the light, and the room was no longer haunted. Lisa left the station, her heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. She had not only proven herself as a capable officer, but had also brought peace to a restless spirit. The story of Officer Lisa Thompson and the haunted evidence room became a legend in Ravenswood. A tale of bravery and compassion would be told for generations to come. And the evidence room, once a place of fear and mystery, was now a symbol of hope and redemption. The Cursed Badge. In the heart of Ravenswood, there was a police station with a storied history. Among the officers, there was a legend about a cursed badge that had been passed down through generations. The badge had once belonged to Officer Thomas Grayson, a dedicated cop who had died under mysterious circumstances. Since then, every officer who wore the badge experienced strange and terrifying events. Officer Tom Reynolds, a new recruit eager to prove himself, was assigned the cursed badge. Despite the warnings from his colleagues, Tom dismissed the stories as mere superstition. He believed that the tales were simply the product of overactive imaginations and had no basis in reality. From the moment he put on the badge, strange things began to happen. He heard footsteps following him, saw shadows moving in the corners of his vision, and received calls from unknown numbers. One night, as he was patrolling the quiet streets of Ravenswood, his radio crackled to life with a voice that sent chills down his spine. "Help me," the voice whispered. "I cannot rest." Tom's heart pounded in his chest as he tried to make sense of what he was hearing. He knew he had to find a way to help the restless spirit. He remembered the stories of Officer Grayson and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death. Determined to uncover the truth, Tom began to investigate the history of the badge and its previous owners. He discovered that Officer Grayson had been investigating a series of unsolved murders when he died. The case had remained open, and the evidence had been stored in the old police station. Tom decided to visit the evidence room, hoping to find clues that would help him solve the case and bring peace to the restless spirit. As he entered the evidence room, the air grew colder and the lights flickered. He felt a presence in the room with him, and the whispers returned. He found a box labeled Grayson Case and began to sift through the contents. Among the items, he found a journal belonging to Officer Grayson, detailing his investigation and the suspects he had been tracking. Tom followed the leads in the journal, uncovering a web of corruption and deceit that had been hidden for years. He discovered that the murders were connected to a powerful figure in the town, someone who had gone to great lengths to cover up their crimes. With the new evidence, Tom presented his findings to his superiors, and the case was reopened. The investigation led to the arrest of the culprit, and justice was finally served. That night, Tom returned to the police station, hoping to see the spirit one last time. As he entered the room, the air grew colder and the whispers returned. The shadowy figure of Officer Grayson appeared before him, his face serene and his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," Grayson whispered. "I can finally rest." With that, the figure faded into the light, and the room was no longer haunted. Tom felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. He had not only proven himself as a capable officer, but had also brought peace to a restless spirit. The story of Officer Tom Reynolds and the Cursed Badge became a legend in Ravenswood, a tale of bravery and compassion that would be told for generations to come. And the badge, once a symbol of fear and mystery, was now a symbol of hope and redemption. The Vanishing Prisoner. In the heart of Ravenswood, there stood a high-security prison known for its strict regulations and formidable walls. The prison, officially named Ravenswood Correctional Facility, had a reputation for housing some of the most dangerous criminals in the region. Among the inmates and officers, there was one cell block that was particularly notorious, Cell Block D. It was said to be haunted, and the stories surrounding it were enough to send chills down anyone's spine. Prisoners who were placed in Cell Block D often reported strange occurrences. They claimed to see a shadowy figure that would vanish without a trace, hear whispers in the dead of night, and feel an overwhelming sense of dread. The tales were so persistent that even the most hardened criminals would beg to be moved to another cell. The officers, too, were wary of the cell block, and it was only used when absolutely necessary. One night, Officer Jackson, a seasoned guard with years of experience, was assigned to patrol Cell Block D. Despite the warnings from his colleagues, Jackson was determined to prove that the stories were nothing more than superstition. He believed that the prisoners were simply trying to scare the guards and create an atmosphere of fear. As Jackson made his rounds, he noticed that the air in cell block D was colder than the rest of the prison. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. He could hear the faint sound of whispers, but he dismissed them as the wind. He continued his patrol, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, he saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the end of the corridor. The figure was barely visible, shrouded in darkness. Jackson called out, but there was no response. He approached cautiously, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. As he got closer, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving Jackson bewildered. He shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He must have been imagining things. He continued his patrol, but the sense of unease grew stronger. The whispers became louder, and he could make out fragments of conversations, pleas for help, and anguished cries. He felt a cold hand on his shoulder, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he reached the end of the corridor. He saw a cell door slightly ajar and decided to investigate. As he stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. The temperature dropped suddenly, and the room grew darker. He heard the whispers again, this time more insistent. He fumbled for his radio, but it was dead. No signal, no power. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped. He pounded on the door, shouting for help, but no one came. The whispers grew louder, and he felt a presence in the room with him. He turned to face the source of the whispers and saw the shadowy figure standing in the corner. The figure stepped forward, becoming more distinct. It was a man, his face twisted in anguish, his eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. He reached out to Jackson, his hand passing through the air like mist. "Help me," he whispered, his voice filled with pain. "I cannot rest." Jackson's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what he was seeing. He knew he had to find a way to help the restless spirit. He remembered the stories of prisoners who had died in cell block D, their deaths shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Determined to uncover the truth, he began to investigate the history of the cell block. He discovered that the cell had once held a man named Thomas Blackwood, who had been wrongfully accused of a crime he didn't commit. He had died in the cell, his spirit unable to move on due to the injustice he had suffered. Jackson knew that the only way to free him was to clear his name and bring the truth to light. With the help of his colleagues, he dug through old case files and uncovered evidence that proved Thomas's innocence. He presented the evidence to the authorities, and Thomas's name was finally cleared. That night, he returned to cell block D, hoping to see the spirit one last time. As he entered the cell, the air grew colder and the whispers returned. The shadowy figure appeared once more, but this time, his face was serene, and his eyes were filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. "I can finally rest." With that, the figure faded into the light, and the cell was no longer haunted. Jackson left the prison, his heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. He had not only proven himself as a capable officer, but had also brought peace to a restless spirit. The story of Officer Jackson and the vanishing prisoner became a legend in Ravenswood, a tale of bravery and compassion that would be told for generations to come. And Cell Block D, once a place of fear and mystery, was now a symbol of hope and redemption.